I went to the Astros game last week with my family and some of my son's closest friends. One of his friends is very involved in the Black Lives Matter movement. And I thought, oh great, this will give me a chance to really pick at his brain. He is young, he is energetic, he's an amazing human being, and he's a man of color. And his color is cinnamon. Now that might sound a little funny to people, but it's based on this book, The Colors of Us. Karen Katz goes through and she labels all of the different colors on the planet as food. I am a pasty, creamy peanut butter. Occasionally just a peanut. And I don't know about you, but when I was a teenager, I spent lots of time lying in the sun trying to get rid of that pasty peanut butter look and become toasty cinnamon. So here is this man, this young, beautiful man, the color of envy of many a white teen. I mean, people pay money to go in tanning salons to become cinnamon, and yet this man is treated less than. This man is treated less than because the color of his skin, which was confusing to me as a teen. And in many ways, it has left him fighting for his life. This is a man that I've known since he was a teen, and has all grown up now. And I worry about him every day. He just moved to College Station, which is not a city that is well known for openness to people of color, whether they're, as Karen Katz says, beautiful cinnamon, milk chocolate, dark chocolate, French toast, honey, or butterscotch. He knows. And he has said to me before, he said, you know what? I know I could be the next random black man who gets pulled over by the next random racist police officer and gets killed. That could be my whole story. Just because of the color of his skin. Like Trayvon Martin, who was walking in his father's neighborhood. Like Eric Gardner, who was selling loose cigarettes and was put in a chokehold and kept saying, I can't breathe, who died. Like Stephen Clark, who was in his grandparents' backyard in March of this year with his cell phone that police officers mistaked for a gun and they killed him, 17 years old, in his grandparents' backyard. Or unarmed Terrence Kuchar, who a white Tulsa police officer had called him a bad dude before she fatally shot him with his hands up as he stood next to his vehicle in the street. Or Walter Scott, an unarmed black man who was pulled over for a broken taillight and shot 5 times in the back as he was trying to get away from the officer who was tasing him. I could go on. There are many, many of these stories. Many, many. It's crazy. I think it's a version of lynching that's going on. According to a newspaper in New Orleans, almost 3,500 black men and women were lynched in the United States from 1882 to 1964. Mobs of white men would go and grab a young black man, sometimes just from a random house, and hold a public lynching. No judge, no jury, just a form of terrorism. And I think every time a young black male is shot and killed by a police officer, and that officer is acquitted with no jail time at all, even when it's on YouTube and somebody has recorded it, aren't we saying the same message that we were with lynching? That black lives don't matter? I think we are. It's very disturbing to me. So this lovely young man of color at the ball game with me, when we were sitting there, I asked him, is it working? Are we making any progress with Black Lives Matter? And he said, that's a very good question. And he thought about it for a minute, and he said, well, people are showing up to protest. And I have to believe that that matters. He said, we all have to believe that that matters. Because we don't have the luxury of pretending that the fight is still not needed to be fought. He said we have to be patient, and we have to recognize that it could take generations to get to where we want to go. Then he quoted Barack Obama. When you're dealing with something as deeply rooted as racism or bias in any society, you've got to have vigilance, but you have to recognize that it's going to take some time and struggle. And you have to be steady so that you don't give up when you don't get all the way there. So my son's friend, I could feel his sadness, but I think he's absolutely 100% right. We have to keep carrying the candle. We have to carry it into the darkness, shining the light, bending the arc toward justice. As Unitarian Universalists, we cannot forget that racism is alive and well today. We cannot say, oh, it was 50 years ago when this happened. No, it's happening today. For example, my older son and his wife are on holiday right now in Italy. And before they went, they decided to get their TSA global pre-check, whatever that is, thing. What they noticed at their interview for their TSA global pre-check was their white privilege. They went in the same time a black couple went in. For my son and his white wife, they were basically not interviewed at all. For the black couple, they were interrogated. They were questioned and questioned and questioned and given attitude. All the while, our kids paid their fee, had white skin, were handed their papers and dismissed. My son said, I don't know if that other couple got their clearance or not. But he did know they were hassled and harassed, and he was not. So racism is alive and well. It's still a problem. We can see it how black people are treated. We can also see it politically. Right now, there are only 2 African American senators in the whole Senate. 2%. 98 are not. And there have only been 10 African Americans that have ever served in the Senate. I just recently found out when Barack Obama was a senator in 2005, he was the only African American in the whole Senate. It's crazy. What's wrong with this picture? Our population is about 13% African Americans in America. We should have 13 senators representing us in the Senate. So that's a level of racism. We can also see it in the NFL, our National Football League. In 2016, quarterback Colin Kaepernick took a knee during the national anthem to protest racial discrimination in our country, but particularly to stand up for all of this, the killing of unarmed young black males by police officers. Other NFL players joined him. Then, for the next 2 years, it's been a hot debate. Are these NFL players being disrespectful to the national anthem? President Trump has been outraged and says that anybody that takes the knee should be fired. He also said that all of us should boycott the NFL for letting these people disrespect the national anthem. Now you may be thinking, what about disrespect of freedom of speech? What about disrespect for our right to protest in a peaceful way? What about our disrespect to the African American population in our country that is so discriminated against? But for the NFL, the main problem was when President Trump said, boycott the NFL. Because now, all of a sudden, we're talking about a bottom line here, finances. So the NFL got together and came up with a new policy just this past May that said players would have to stand for the national anthem. There would be no kneeling for the national anthem. They could decide to stay in the locker room if they wanted to, but there would be no disrespect of the national anthem. Which is crazy to me, because it was never about the national anthem in the first place. It was about discrimination. It was about police brutality. It was hijacked and redefined as something it never was. It was hijacked by the 1% wealthy white male. Now, the NFL Players Association executive director was not happy about this. He said, management has chosen to quash the same freedom of speech that protects someone who wants to salute the flag in an effort to prevent someone who does not wish to do so. The sad irony of this rule is that anyone who wants to express their patriotism is subject to the whim of a person who calls himself an owner. The association director said, I know that true American patriots are not cheering today. Then, the Philadelphia Eagles defensive end Chris Long tweeted that the policy is really a fear about the diminished bottom line. Long, who is white, said, it's really just another form of racism that we need to recognize. It's subtle, it's hijacked, it's redefined by wealthy white people. 3 leagues, 92 teams, 1 African American owner. It made me sad when they came out with that policy because it's really a missed opportunity. I envisioned for myself, what if they hadn't interfered? What would have happened if they let it run their course? Would whole teams have kneeled in solidarity? Probably. Would fans have kneeled? Probably. Would we have opened the conversation more and more about what's happening to young black males that are being killed for no reason? Probably. So the NFL policy to me really is another form of racism. Whites making the call because they're protecting their bottom financial line. So I asked my son's friend for some hope in that hope, struggle, and change. I was like, tell me any progress that you see in the Black Lives Matter movement. And he said, well, one thing I can tell you is people my age, 29, are marching. They're showing up. He said that didn't happen 5 years ago, so I'm very hopeful about it. And then we both brainstormed about the changes that have happened, the progress that has happened in my lifetime and a lot of your lifetimes as well. There's no separate but equal schools anymore. That law is off the book. No move to the back of the bus anymore. No, you can't eat at this restaurant or stay at this hotel or drink in this water fountain anymore. No, that has all shifted. Then my son's friend told me the story that Chris Rock tells. I don't know if you know who Chris Rock is. He's a famous actor and director and stand-up comedian, and he's lovely. Chris Rock tells this story. My mother tells stories of growing up in Andrews, South Carolina, and the black people had to go to the vet to get their teeth pulled out. And you still had to go to the back door, however, because if the white people knew that the vet had used instruments on black people, they wouldn't take their pets to the vet anymore. Chris Rock, famous, amazing Chris Rock, says, this is not some person I read about. This is my mother. So definitely, there's been progress, and I'm grateful, grateful, grateful for that. Huge progress. But there's so much more that we can't pretend it's all done. True equality will be when black people are able to thrive at the same level as white people. Where black children don't have to be told at 7 years old that they have 2 strikes against them because they're black and they're male. Where black children don't have to be warned to be wary of police officers because they might kill you, even if you've done nothing wrong or you're not breaking the law and you're unarmed. Then we'll know we're closer. So what can we do? What can we do as Unitarian Universalists to work for that equity and that justice and to stand with our brothers and sisters of color? Well, I think the first thing that we can do is tell ourselves a higher truth. In fact, I encourage you to live that way your whole life, to tell yourself as higher truth as you can. Racism is happening on purpose. Let's not pretend that it isn't. Racist policies are created on purpose to keep the 1% white male in the 1% of our country economically. The truth is a higher truth. White people have benefited from racism against black people. I will tell you, as a white female, I will get a lower price on a car. I will get hired for a job more often than a black person. I will get promoted more often. I will get a mortgage for a house easier. I mean, the reality is, white privilege is a big deal. I will go to jail 6 times fewer than a black person. So, that's the story of racism. We don't want to whitewash it. It means unequal opportunity, unequal justice for all. I want you to think about what happened to Barack Obama's birth certificate. The Republican machine started saying that he wasn't born in the USA. Well, immediately his campaign scanned a copy of his birth certificate and sent it to the Republicans. But the rumors did not go away. Why? Because they were not started out of ignorance. So why would they end out of knowledge? The Republicans already had the knowledge before they started the lie. So, supporting these bigotries is in the self-interest of a tiny group of people, super rich, Protestant, heterosexual, non-immigrant, white, Anglo-Saxon males. And that's the truth. So when you see white privilege or experience it, or you see where black lives do not matter, call it out. Put it on your social media. Keep exposing it. That's one thing we can do. Tell the truth. Racism is happening on purpose, and I'm not going to pretend that that's not true. I say this as you can also generalize it in your life. Stop pretending and tell yourself a higher truth. I think if we walk in that with our own life, whatever we need to change in our life, wherever we need to grow in our life, to stop pretending and really look and take charge of my life, then we can generalize it into other things that have to change for our culture, including racism. I encourage you to get at a higher level of honesty with yourself. The next thing we can do to eradicate racism is to not get discouraged, because it's tempting to. We can generalize this in our whole life as well. If you have a big goal that you're working on, it might not happen in your lifetime, but it's still worth doing. It might take generations, but it's still worth doing. Generations of hope, struggle, and change. What you are doing for whatever that passion is inside of you matters. the energy you're putting toward it matters. Because it might take generations, for example, for people to really realize what we're doing to the planet and to really get on board. But what you're doing to save the planet today matters. It still counts. It might take generations before people realize they need to eat less meat. It might take generations before people are able to eradicate poverty. With racism, it might take generations of interracial marriages, interracial children, for us to wake up to all the colors that we are. To wake up our whole society, as what Martin Luther King Jr. so famously said. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. That is so important. Anything you can put in that direction to move that direction, move our culture, it matters. We may not see the day where racism is completely gone in our lifetime, but we'll be moving it for the next 7 generations. Which actually reminds me of Dick Cheney, which every time I think of him I smile. I'm so happy he has a daughter that's gay. I mean, what better way to get rid of homophobia than to, have somebody that you love and adore come up to you and say, hey, guess what, Dad? I'm gay. It matters every time. So the last thing I think we can do to fight racism is be disruptive. Hit them in the pocketbook. Hit them where politically. Don't be shy. Be bolder. Be brave. According to Ibram X. Kendi, he's one of the nation's experts on racism and a professor at the American University in Washington, D.C. To undermine racial discrimination, Americans must focus their efforts on those who have the power to undermine racial discrimination. That's white males. White males with a lot of money and a lot of influence. White males have the power to eliminate racism, but they have only taken steps in that direction when they realize that eliminating some form of racial discrimination was in their best interest. We have to tell the truth. They're not changing things on moral grounds. They're not changing things because I care about immigrants or African Americans. No. The white male system changes only when it's in their self-interest. They have conceded to anti-racist change as a better alternative when the disruptive, disordered, politically harmful, or unprofitable conditions that anti-racists have created impacted them. Kendi said, it only takes one person, 2 people, tiny groups, small surroundings, engaging in mobilization of anti-racists into organizations. Anti-racist protesters have created positions of powers for themselves by articulating clear demands of the white male system. And they have made it clear we will not stop until the demands are met. Another way of saying this is, Marco Rubio will not stop taking money from the NRA unless it means he'll be voted out of office. We have to make it clear to him. He will be voted out of office if he continues to take money from the NRA. Clear demand, clear consequence. That's what being disruptive is. Don't be shy in your life. Remember, well-behaved women never make history. Be willing, if you want change in your life and in our culture, you have to get bolder. And it matters that I'm willing to stand up and say, that's not right. No, that's an example of Black lives don't matter, and they matter as much as mine. We have to get bolder with our voice and be willing to show up at protest and say, I have no room for racism anymore. So, I want to leave you with some more words of Kendi. There will come a time when we will love humanity, when we will understand we are all connected. Sounds like Unitarian Universalism. When we will gain the courage to fight for an equitable society for our beloved humanity, knowing that when we fight for humanity, we are fighting for ourselves. We also have to fight for our lives. There will come a time, and maybe, just maybe, if you are willing to tell yourself a higher truth, if you are willing to not be discouraged, and if you are willing to be disruptive, maybe, just maybe, the time for another shift on racism is now. May it be so. Blessed be. Thank you. And now we're going to stand and sing Down by the Riverside, page 162.
That's the hardback gray hymnal, number 162. You have to keep your finger on the place because we're going to turn that page back and forth. Rise and join me as the Spirit enables you. I'll lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. Gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside. Gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Gonna lay down my burden down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. Gonna lay down my burden down by the riverside. Gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Gonna shake hands around the world, everywhere I roam, everywhere I roam, everywhere I roam. Gonna shake hands around the world, everywhere I go. Gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more.
Thank you. And as you go forward this week, I want to remind you we're all in this together. As I stand against racism, as you stand against racism, we stand for the healing of the world, where we really can get to peace on earth. So every chance you have this week, I encourage you, be disruptive.